actually 13 families that can be considered to be the core of the powers that be, and of those 13 families, there's usually about 3 individuals that are actively running things. And from those 13 families, it goes out to a group of about 300 families, and from those 300, it goes out to about 3,000. So in that regard, it's very much the mafia. It's very much a Cosa Nostra, our household. And then from there, they operate all of the political elite and what we would think of as the celebrity upper echelon civil service. And they're all minion classes. So the powers that be could be described as only those 13 families, or it might be considered the 3,000 families on up, or it could be those people that have that level of security clearance higher than the President of the United States.
So these people are not just in the United States, then they're scattered throughout the world.
Correct, and the revolution is going to be planetary. It's not a United States sort of thing. In a similar fashion, we're going to repeat history here. Not only did the world deal with the American Revolution, but we also had the French Revolution, a Spanish Revolution, the revolution in the Caribbean, revolutions up and down South America, all in a very brief period of time in the 1700s. We're going to go through something like that, only it'll all happen at once across the planet. Probably over the course of 2011 and onward.
What other countries would you expect that type of activity to be the most intense in? I mean, China, for example, is a pretty well-controlled society.
No, China, in fact, is going to suffer greatly because they're going to be in a very terrible situation economically as the dollar dies. They have indeed dumped a lot of their dollar assets, but they're going to find themselves in a very interesting situation where they're going to have to turn their entire economy towards local or internal consumption just to keep their people employed. They've got a creeping unemployment problem that is going to threaten their political stability. Russia, on the other hand, seems fairly stable. Brazil seems fairly stable. Some of the South American countries are going to be fairly stable through this process. New Zealand will do okay. Australia will do okay from a different viewpoint entirely. The rest of the Anglosphere, though, is at most at risk. So that would be United States, Canada, to a lesser extent Canada, but then certainly Britain and then over into Europe.
Well, what's interesting about what you're saying there is that, of course, in the United States, we've got kind of a history of independence and our constitutional way of thinking, constitutional government. It's not quite that way in Europe, and of course, we're armed in this country, whereas it's not that way in Europe because the laws have been passed to take away a lot of the guns. What form would a revolution take?
Your enemy, and there might be instances of those. The strategy, though, will be to root out and destroy individual members of the powers that be that are at the upper end of the financial system. Bear in mind that the central bank and warfare model will collapse. Central banks at a global level will collapse. And those countries that don't have them, oddly enough, like Iran, will start off with a greater sense of stability, and areas that are unstable will naturally start gravitating towards revolution in the format of even just mob action as people try and storm places, initially just for food. So, for instance, we have data that suggests that there are going to be food riots in Rome that will lead to the sacking of the Vatican and the opening of some of the Vatican's secret hoard of library material, simply because people will be so desperate and starving for food at one point here that there will be large masses of people shoving around looking for things to eat, and they'll go to areas that are guarded, assuming that that's what's there.
I guess what I was kind of asking, maybe I didn't say it clearly, was here in the United States, I guess you could maybe see a revolution, or at least some portion of it, try to restore a constitutional republic. Even though our constitution is maybe not perfect, it beats the heck out of living in a dictatorship or fascism or whatnot. What kind of government, and do you see that happening? And then what kind of government would they head towards in Europe then, not coming from that background?
Neither one of us are going to go that way. I don't see the United States as a constitutional republic being reconstituted in that sense. Okay. There may indeed be a national identity that exists after the revolution, but I don't see it as being modeled around any kind of a central authority. The data seems to suggest that we're going to make both a quantitative and a qualitative leap as a species and go into something that could best be described as a fractal or asymmetric governmental organization. Imagine, if you will, a situation in which you are not dependent on anyone for the energy to run your house or your vehicle, and that you can use your vehicle because it's anti-gravity and costs you no energy to go anywhere on the planet at any given moment. There's your reliance upon and need for government intervention at all levels falls by the wayside. And it's at that level that we will come out of all of this because of what's going to occur over these next few years. Also, take as substantiated or at least evidentially provided for postulate that such energies and such technology exists, and our government's been perfecting it since about 1956. And so when the barriers to that information and technology fall away, there is going to be a level of renaissance on this planet that's quite staggering. But it won't require a central government, nor will it require necessarily a country called the United States.
It sounds like under that situation, it wouldn't almost require a centralized anything.
That's pretty much the case, and that's why we've been for years discussing what we've been calling SOCs, SOCs, or self-organizing collectives. These self-organizing collectives come together as is needed to get something done at a community level and then disband when not needed. Unlike our current government, which comes together when they can make us think that we need them, and then they never disband in spite of the fact that we don't need them anymore.
Right.
You know, we're carrying laws on the books that were written in the 1800s dealing with specific financial conditions that no longer exist. That kind of thing.
Sure.
So the new paradigm, if you will, that we create as we come out of this transformation is up to all of us to put together because we haven't invented it yet and no one's going to hand it to us. But there will be something that you can be quite sure of, that the idea of centralization, as in a large, quasi, mostly benevolent, patriarchally based political elite has seen its last days, or is in the process of its last days, and when we come out the other side, we won't need them anymore. And so I doubt we'll recreate them. And so in that sense, the question is not really pertinent, because Europe will be going to this fractal, asymmetric, or holographic sort of organization where everybody has as much information as is needed to do anybody else's job, so to speak, and has the free energy and the capability to do it as we go forward in time. Sort of like the basis for what the Star Trek whole concept is about. I'm not even sure we'll have money once we've got the free energy devices.
Yeah, it certainly seemed like it's going to be like you say, it's a paradigm shift almost of every single thing that we take for granted or base our current activities on.
And that's, I think, is what is really at the core of a lot of the fear that everybody has, because we're headed there whether we like it or not. And really, to a certain extent, a lot of people surrender control to government saying, oh, I'm very afraid of all of that here. You protect me, you guys just go out there and take care of that for me. And unfortunately, in the brave new world ahead of us, that attitude doesn't fly. Everybody's got to take personal responsibility and get out there and do some work. And it'll be a radical change for a lot of people, yeah.
Well, if this kind of unlimited energy is available, though, wouldn't there be some temptation or attempt for the powers that be to try to somehow seize power of it and use it to try to re-erect their system of control?
They've been using it since the 50s to maintain their system of control, and they're losing it as we speak. They may indeed attempt to resurrect it, but once that knowledge is out, it's out, and you can't put it back. So their control fades from that point onward, because if I've got unlimited energy and so on, they have no threat they can maneuver over me to make me their slave again, right? Sure. It's kind of like, at that point, it's the great equalizer, the ultimate leveler. If I have unlimited energy, as a corollary to that, I have the ability to what's known as tweak the template. If you go and read Tom Bearden's site on free energy, you get the real nuances of that term. But it means being able to tweak reality as it's being created. And so you could take a handful of, leaves from your garden and make them into a turkey dinner if you wanted. If you could tweak the template correctly, you just tell it how to rearrange itself. If you have the unlimited energy, you can go ahead and do that. And basically, that's at the core of anti-gravity. And so these people are out there doing that now, and it's kind of like the replicator idea of the food service on Star Trek Enterprise kind of thing, right? And at that level, your energy needs and your food needs are met. Someone shows up on your doorstep, it's like, well, guy, I'm every bit as powerful as you. You can't push me around anymore. A lot of people wouldn't be pushed around.
One question we've had from the viewers is, could you give an example or some examples of free energy devices?
Sure. Actually, there are some that actually appear to be working now, and they're not free, but they're what are called over unity. That is to say, you get more energy out than you put in, and those are the cold fusion devices. The issue of cold fusion is that it apparently only works when it's at a hyperdimensionally sensitive area. And so these are known spots on the planet that correspond to the intersection of the giant tetrahedron, so to speak, that is at the core of everything and expresses itself out through all the various energy levels. So the cold fusion does work. There are examples of using that level of energy coming out of Russia now, and these include things like the device called the Skinar Kosmodik, and it's a method of using electrical energy in very finely pulsed format to change the human body. And it tickles the ability of the particular cells and tells them rearrange yourself back to where you were before the injury. And it's rather a remarkable device. It's not instantaneous and it's not the cure for everything, but it says that we're on the appropriate way there. And true, it doesn't work on free energy, but it's in that same category of devices that come from hyperdimensional or hyperspatial quantum understanding. So the issue is I don't have a free energy device at the moment. I've seen some examples of things that I consider to be over unity devices, magnetic motors, etc., that I could turn into a never-ending source of electrical energy with no problem at all. And these are available to be seen under the heading of magnetic motors on YouTube if you want to go and look at them.
All right.
Some of them are really quite staggering, and I'm in the process of building a few of them myself if I can ever get the time. Because you can hook them up to a generator and just have them trickle charge your system. But the free energy devices that we're discussing are related to the hovering triangles that are said to have been perfected by the U.S. shadow government that controls all of the Anglosphere in 1956. And there's enough mass of evidence that suggests that they indeed have perfected those, and then our data suggests that some of these secrets will be coming out over this next year in fits and starts and clumps as various different things occur. And let me also point out something else. It is a telling bit of information just knowing how much is being redacted by the government. So, for instance, if one were to make a Freedom of Information request relative to over unity devices or any of these various different terms, and then you got back 1,000 pages of which 998 were blacked out, well, it tells you that there's a whole lot of evidence they don't want you to see. And just based on the number of redacted pages versus delivered pages, there's about 100-to-1 correspondence. So for every page they deliver in a Freedom of Information Act response to anything related to over unity or zero-point energy, there are 100 pages that are delivered in a mostly redacted format. So that really tells me that indeed they have perfected it because they're trying to hide so much.
Wow. Are you aware of any websites that talk specifically about that type of, about the devices and the amount of data, like examples of these FOIA requests where you could actually see?
Sure. The place to start would be Tom Bearden's site. Okay. Thomas Bearden, and he's you can put in free energy and Tom Bearden in any search engine and start piggybacking from there. And he has links on his site that will take you to other sites and just keep going.
Okay. Now we've had another question come in here. They're asking if you're aware of an alliance between Russia, Canada, Scandinavian regarding the new electrics.
Okay, that's what we show coming out in 2013 or so onward. Our data in a general sense, in a broad sense, suggests that a renaissance is coming to humans after we get through 2012 and we start in on 2013. It suggests that that renaissance will be powered by what we call the new electrics. The new electrics is the outbreak of all this information about how to create free energy, etc. Bear in mind it'll take us a number of years to get that spread throughout society, just the way it took us a number of years to electrify the country.
Sure.
And regardless of what mechanisms we use to distribute this. But anyway, our data suggests that there's a core of resources between Siberia, Canada, and Brazil that will form a central component of the free energy into the future. And it appears to be related to a crystalline structured element or molecule or something that will be dug up in Canada and